The first thing I noticed was the smell of smoke. Not a campfire smell exactly. More like wet clothes and burned plastic. Which was strange because camping wasn't allowed in that part of the preserve. This happened 3 summers ago when I was 31. At the time, I was doing wildlife photography on weekends. Not professionally enough to make a living from it, but seriously enough that I had spent too much money on lenses and knew how to sit still for hours without getting bored. There was a large forest preserve about an hour from where I lived. Most people only use the front trails near the picnic area, but farther in, past a closed metal gate, there was an old logging road that ran toward a creek bed. I had been there a few times before to photograph deer, owls, and smaller birds that stayed away from the busy parts. Technically, you were allowed to walk in that area during daylight. You just couldn't camp there, hunt there, or go off the marked preserve boundary. I got there before sunrise on a humid Saturday in late August. The air was already warm, and the bugs were bad enough that I sprayed my neck and wrists twice before leaving the truck. I parked near the closed gate, grabbed my camera bag, tripod, water bottle, and a small lunch, then started walking down the logging road. It was quiet in that heavy summer way, where even the birds sound half asleep at first. The road was soft in places from rain earlier that week, and every few steps, I had to avoid puddles or low branches hanging across the path. About 40 minutes in, I reached the creek area where I usually set up. There was a bend in the water where deer sometimes crossed in the early morning. I unfolded my tripod, mounted the camera, and settled behind a patch of brush with a decent view. For the first few hours, everything was normal. I photographed a heron in the creek, a pair of cardinals, and one young buck that appeared for maybe 30 seconds before vanishing into the trees. I drank warm water from my bottle, checked my memory cards, wiped sweat off my forehead, and waited. That kind of waiting is part of the job, if you can call it a job. Most of wildlife photography is being bored quietly enough that something forgets you're there. Around mid-morning, I smelled smoke. At first it was faint. I thought maybe it was coming from a farm or a house beyond the preserve. Sometimes people burned brush on their land, and the smell could travel weirdly through the woods. But this smell was different. It came in short waves, like it was close, then gone. And underneath the smoke was something chemical. Burned plastic maybe, damp fabric. Something that didn't belong in clean woods. I stood up and looked around. No smoke, no voices, no fire. Then I noticed a strip of black plastic tied to a branch about 15 feet off the old logging road. It was thin, like it had been cut from a trash bag. It moved slightly in the humid air, even though there was almost no wind. I told myself it was probably trash. Teenagers came out there sometimes. Maintenance workers might have used it as a temporary marker. Hunters weren't supposed to be in the preserve, but I knew that didn't mean they never were. I didn't want to waste the only full day I had over a piece of plastic on a branch. So I packed up my tripod and moved closer to the creek, hoping to find a better angle. That was when I saw the hunting blind. It was tucked between 2 trees, about 20 yards from the creek bed. It looked old at first, just a little box made of weathered plywood and branches. But I knew that spot. I had walked past it before. There had never been a blind there. I stood there for a while, listening. Nothing. Curiosity got the better of me. I walked over slowly and looked inside. There were empty food cans on the floor. Beans, tuna, soup. A dirty blanket was pushed into one corner, and cigarette butts were crushed into the dirt beneath a small opening cut into the wall. There was also a notebook. The cover was warped from moisture. When I opened it, most of the pages had been torn out. The few that were left had no writing I could read, just faint impressions where someone had pressed hard on the pages before removing them. Then I noticed where the blind was facing. The opening looked directly toward the trail I had walked in on that morning. Not toward the creek, not toward a deer path, toward the old logging road. Along the wooden edge beneath the opening were carved notches, short, straight cuts grouped in rows. I counted at least 30 before I stopped. That was when the woods started to feel smaller. I backed out of the blind and tried to think reasonably. Maybe someone homeless had been staying there. Maybe they were gone now. Maybe the notches meant nothing. But once I noticed one thing, I started noticing everything. Behind a fallen tree, I found several plastic water jugs lined up in the leaves. Some were empty, some still half full. A little farther back, there was a tarp pulled low between saplings and covered with dead branches to hide it from the trail. It wasn't a normal campsite. It was made to be missed. I should have left right then. Instead, I did the dumb thing people do when they don't want to admit they're scared. I convinced myself I just needed to move to a different area, take a few more photos, and then head out early. I followed an unofficial animal trail away from the blind, deeper toward a clearing I had used once before. The bugs got worse. My shirt stuck to my back. To all, every sound felt sharper than it had an hour earlier. Near the edge of the clearing, I saw a cheap pair of binoculars hanging from a branch by their strap. They were pointed toward the trail. Below them, half hidden under leaves, was a metal coffee can. I nudged it lightly with my boot. Inside were hair ties, a cracked sunglasses lens, 2 old keychains, a purple lighter, and a few other small personal things. It didn't look like one person's trash. It looked like a collection. I stepped away from it, my skin prickling. That was when I saw the trail camera. It was strapped low to a tree, maybe knee height, angled directly at the narrow path I'd just walked through. Not at a game crossing, not at the creek, at people. I had used trail cameras before. This one was cheap, dark green, with fresh tape wrapped around the battery compartment. Without thinking, I crouched and checked the side. The memory card slot was empty. Someone had taken the card out recently. I was still crouched there when I heard a click behind me. It was small, but I knew that sound. A shutter. Not mine. I turned so fast I nearly knocked over my tripod. About 20 yards away, behind a curtain of brush, there was a figure crouched low. I couldn't see their face clearly. Just a dark shirt, a pale hand, and something held up in front of them. A phone, maybe, or a camera. They were recording me. For a second, neither of us moved. Then the figure slowly stood. I picked up my tripod without folding it, like it could somehow be useful if I needed it. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I'm leaving," I said. I didn't know anyone was back here. The person didn't answer. They just stood behind the brush, watching. I backed away first, then turned toward the old logging road. I wanted to run, but I had expensive camera gear on my back, a tripod in one hand, and muddy ground under my boots. If I fell and broke an ankle, I'd be stuck there with whoever that was. So I walked fast. The worst part was that they followed. Not right behind me, not close enough to make it obvious at first, but every time the trail curved, I heard movement through the trees to my left, a branch shifting. leaves crushed under slow steps, a soft snap that stopped when I stopped. I pulled out my phone, 1 bar. I called my friend Mark. The call failed the first time. The second time, it connected, but the signal cut in and out so badly I could barely hear him. I raised my voice anyway. "Hey, I'm on the preserve trail near the old logging road," I said. "I'm heading back now. Can you stay on the phone? I'm going to call the ranger station next." There was no ranger station nearby. Not really, just a county office number on a sign near the parking lot. But I said it loudly. Then I said, "Yeah, I already have photos. I'm almost at the gate." The movement in the trees stopped. I kept walking. I didn't look back for almost 5 full minutes. When I finally did, I saw nothing but trees and shadow. By the time I reached my truck, my shirt was soaked, my hands were shaking, and I had scratches across both arms from pushing through brush. I locked the doors before I even took off my camera bag. I reported what I found, but I don't know if anything came of it. A county officer called me once, asked for the location, and said they would send someone to check the area. The part that still bothers me happened later that night. I was reviewing my photos on my computer, trying to calm down by focusing on the normal shots. Birds, deer, the creek, trees, and morning light. Then, in the background of one photo, I saw a person. At first, I thought it was a shadow between 2 trunks. But when I zoomed in, I could see the outline clearly enough. Someone standing still behind the trees. I checked the next photo. They were there too. Farther back, slightly blurred, but watching. The worst one was from the first hour of the morning, when I had been sitting by the creek, completely relaxed, thinking I was alone. In the far background, barely visible behind my tripod, the same figure was already there. I went to that preserve to photograph wildlife. Somehow, I became the thing being watched.